mission has begun.
Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. After 110 episodes, we finally get to Sabaton. I can't believe it. And kind of an accident, right? Because it finished second in the poll that we put up on our Facebook page. But with all the requests we've had for it, I think it was definitely about time. What do you say?
Yeah, I wanted to throw a bone to... It got a lot of votes. It really didn't trail Megadeth's Euthanasia album by very many. So it just kind of made the choice for me pretty easy this week. And we also put up another poll hoping to perhaps figure out what our next Iron Maiden episode is going to be, as I guess it was such a long time ago that we did Killers that some of our listeners forgot we ever even covered Iron Maiden. So,
and either way, we haven't done a Bruce Dickinson album, which is preposterous.
So I posted all of their albums that they released from when Bruce joined the band in '82 up until he left the band in the mid '90s before the two albums that they did with whatever his name was,
Blaze Bayley.
Yeah, Blaze Bayley. So I didn't want to overcomplicate things by adding the second era of Bruce albums, although I know a lot of people probably would have voted for Brave New World. That could be something to, I guess, explore at a later time, but I feel like this was a more important era of the band.
For sure, and I'm kind of shocked we didn't do that, and I was thinking to myself, we also haven't done any Dio albums, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, so we'll get there, I'm sure. But before we talk about some Sabaton, one thing I had listened to this week, the melodic sounds of David Redman's vocals. David Redman from the UK, he's been with Pink Cream 69, he recorded with Adagio, he's now doing some solo stuff, and he came out with an album called Medusa, which was quite solid. Not going to be my album of the year or anything like that, but a very, very solid release, and anything that he sings on, I'm usually a fan of, at least to some degree. But I know that you had mentioned, or kind of offline, a couple of things that you had heard or had just found out about that you wanted to mention. So why don't you talk about those?
I heard on Twitter, Alundra Blaze's favorite metal album of the year is this Medusa album by David.
I wonder why.
Yeah, David Brian Redman. All right, too many inside jokes. I made a Twitter post today about Canyon and got a response from our friend Matt Craig, who was like, "Oh, I used to love Canyon." So I was like, "Wow!" I was hoping anyone noticed that I posted that. So,
well, I guess it's not nobody then; it's somebody, just one.
Shout out to Matt. Yeah. So just a couple of tracks since last we met. Dynasty has another single from their final Advent album called The White. Pretty much what you expect, good stuff from them. I'm looking forward to the whole album. I feel like they never really make a bad album. It's always good stuff from them. And today, actually, Avatarium dropped a new single from their album, Death, Where Is Your Sting? And it is the title track from that album. I was planning on listening to it, and I got sidetracked and never got a chance to, but I'm sure it's awesome in all of its doomy glory. I'm a big fan. I'm not sure of the vocalist's name for Avatarium. I will look it up just to be complete. But I enjoy her vocals so much, and I feel like you so seldomly hear like a doom metal band with a female singer, which I think is such a lovely change. Did you know that they were founded by Candlemass songwriter Leif Edling in 2013?
Did not know that, but I mean, I guess it makes sense in this, it's the same, it's got that doomy feel to it. I find myself gravitating towards a lot of those doom bands, which has like the hybrid vocals, where it has like the female melodic vocals and then like the growls, like, the Beauty and the Beast style, but for doom, like Draconian, for example. Can't get enough of them. One of my favorite bands, although not pure doom. They certainly have elements of it.
A little bit of draconian love from
Yeah,
Justin there.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, her name is Jenny Ann Smith, and yeah, I noticed Marcus Jadell is in this band too. He was in Royal Hunt briefly at one point, who we'll be talking about soon. Um, but anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing that. That's a band that, even though I'm not a doom metal, expert by any stretch, it's a band I've always enjoyed.
I think between them and While Heaven Wept, I feel like that was and I guess to a lesser extent that the Candlemass album their debut that we covered a few months ago, I feel like that was kind of your not intro to the genre, but like you're dipping your toes in the water, so to speak. So you got definitely two winners there, and I know that you kind of enjoyed the Candlemass album more than you thought you would.
Yes. I didn't try buying it and throwing it into an ocean after I listened to it. So I'd say that was a step in the right direction, I suppose.
I like it. But like we said, we're here for Sabaton this week, The Art of War. This album came out in 2008, which just makes me feel old because it feels like it was yesterday. What was the first time you heard this band? Because I'll just tell a little story. I don't think I kind of started listening to them until they were announced for Prague Power back in 2008, where they would ultimately play in 2009 at the 10th edition of the festival. For whatever reason, they weren't on my radar, and then I kind of went back and got a few of their albums, including The Art of War. Had you heard of them prior to the fest, or was this like the first time for you as well?
I think I knew they were playing. This was my first year back at Prague Power in a while, and I knew they were on the bill, but I wasn't familiar with them all. But I knew that our friend Pat was like so excited about it, and so like his enthusiasm really kind of pulled me into their set. And when they started playing 40-1, I never saw a grown man go so apeshit at a concert before. He was so happy, and I thought that they absolutely blew everybody off the stage that weekend. They were like that mid-level band that just blew everybody away. We always talk about Ed Guy at Prague Power 3, and this was a similar slot that Sabaton was in. They had, they'd come back and headline the festival after becoming way more popular, but this is at a time where I want to say The Art of War was kind of the album that started to catapult them into some semblance of I don't know if I would use the word stardom, but at least like it got people on notice. And I think that after going back and listening to some of the older albums prior to this was like their first really, I think, real professionally, like really polished, like really clean sounding album. The older albums kind of have a kind of a rough, almost demo-y kind of vibe to it, but they made me a fan that day with that live performance. I remember going home and I must have listened to 40-1 40 times. Like I just remember between that and listening to Delane's Virtue and Vice from the sampler CD that I got that year, I just was like, it was awesome because I had gone I had bought tickets to that Prague Power mainly to see Power Quest, but also to see Royal Hunt and Fate's Warning and Andre Matos. And I ended up like leaving the festival with like all these new bands that I was excited to listen to, and Sabaton was one of them. And I'd end up becoming a pretty big fan of the band, and I feel like they're still coming out with great albums now with one of my favorite musicians, Tommy Johansson, as part of the lineup. And now that like they have such a following, their live shows are so epic. I mean, I would compare them to an Iron Maiden show visually, as far as like just a massive stage set. There's a tank on stage. It's like Iron Maiden in fatigues.
Yeah, it's funny. The progression and the popularity that these guys have kind of gotten over the years is remarkable. I'll say this, as massive as the live show is now, and I guess we're kind of doing this out of order a bit because, we're talking about the modern live show. it's missing the keyboards, in my opinion. And like, what I think was magical about that first Prog Power performance back in 2009 was the fact that they had a keyboard player on stage with them, and it made a huge difference into the overall sound. His name was Daniel Muir, and for whatever reason, I just think it added to the performance aspect because I saw them with Creator. God, it's got to be about 5 or 6 years ago now,
Right.
and it just it just wasn't as powerful of a live performance, despite the gimmicks and the tank, which was a cool effect. And mind you, I just bought us tickets to go see them in 2 months, so I'm looking forward to the set. But it didn't have the same gravitas, I guess, that it did in those early, in the earlier stages around the time that Art of War had just come out.
Yeah, I mean, it was noticeable for me the first time I saw them when they no longer had a keyboard on stage. I think it's just that they've kind of drifted away from having the keyboard as a main
Lead
part of their
Yeah.
yeah. Like when you go back and listen to this album, there's a lot of keys, and it's like the keys are almost as prominent as the guitars. I feel like the
More
band
so
is kind
even.
of yeah. I feel like the band's gotten away from that in their studio material, so that when they do perform the newer songs live, it's not really necessary to have a live keyboard player. But I mean, there's the keyboard solo towards the end of Ghost Division, and there's just I mean, Cliffs of Gallipoli with the piano parts. Like there's a lot of prominent keys, and I think it really adds. That's why I'm a really big fan of this album, and I remember like just how prominent the keyboard player was. It wasn't just one of those guys that they hid backstage with like a Ferdy Dornberg for Halloween or something, where he's not even on stage. Like it was like part of the band. I that being my first impression of Sabaton, it was hard for me to picture them without a keyboard player on stage, but I'd say most of their career has probably been without one at this point.
That is true. And that live performance was so good that I remember when they announced the show up near you in Rochester in 2011 that I actually came up for the show because I had to see them live again. It was that good of a performance. And they played the Montage, which is obviously, well, not obviously, but it is a very, very small venue. I don't think they had a keyboard player on stage with them that tour, did they? I don't think they brought
I
him
don't
along.
I don't think so either.
It was like a one and done for the
I don't
keyboard.
think there would have been space for him on the stage maybe he was there and they just had to leave him in the back because there was no room. But it was a small venue. I remember that. The band was on tour with Accept. They were opening for Accept on Accept's U.S. tour, and they had Accept was had a night off, and they were like, I think they were in between Toronto and New York City or something, and they were like, let's just play in Rochester. Like we get so few like big name metal bands that come through here, and the fact that it was on a Friday night, I remember asking you, Mike, like, do you guys want to come up and like go see Sabaton headline like with like 75 other people, and then just like hang out all weekend? I mean, that was one of the most fun times I've ever had at a show. And in spite of there not being that many people there, the band played like it was Wacken. Like they were really into it. They didn't half-ass it because of a smaller crowd. We started a Sabaton chant, I think, after every single song, which I think they got a kick out of that. I mean, that there's something fun about kind of seeing a show for a band that's like a huge deal now, and remembering a time where you saw them in a small venue with a small amount of people and a more intimate kind of thing.
Their humble beginnings.
Yeah, it's just it's such a fond memory of being able to hear like when they only had a handful of albums, so you really got a lot of kind of the earlier stuff, your Primo Victorias and things of that nature from albums that came out even before Art of War. I was kind of surprised at how much material the band had prior to this album, because I feel like this was really what put them on the map, along with that Prog Power performance, at least for, I think, the American audience.
For me, I think prior to seeing them live, I think Primo Vittoria was actually my favorite album. But as time has gone on, this has actually become my favorite. And I'll be completely honest with you. the band lost me for a little bit when they had their big lineup change, if you will. Just by way of perspective, they would come out with Coat of Arms in 2010 and Carolus Rex in 2012. It was right around the time that Carolus Rex came out that I don't want to say I lost my interest in the band. I just didn't have the love that I had at one time, and maybe it was because the keyboards weren't on stage, or maybe it was a little bit because of the songwriting. But I've kind of fallen out of love with the band, although I think that the War to End All Wars was a pretty decent album from earlier this year, and the Great War had its moments as well. But the best song that I've heard, and I mentioned this on the podcast, months ago, I thought the Christmas Truce was the best song that they've written probably since this album.
Yeah, I agreed with you that it was a great song. I didn't love. I really enjoyed this album. I really enjoyed Coat of Arms. They kind of lost me a bit with Carolus Rex, and then I feel like when the band kind of reformed and Heroes came out, there were some songs on there, like To Hell and Back that I love, Resistant Bite. It was like they, I think they were trying to try not like make all the songs sound the same, and I felt like they were trying to like add different elements, and it really worked for me. And I've been a big fan of all their albums since then. And then when Tommy joined the band, I've definitely noticed his influence as just even as a guitar riffer. Just there's things that remind me of Rainseed / Majestica that are, you'd have to be a huge fan to like really notice, I think. But I enjoy that he has some influence on what Sabaton's doing now. And I mean, I don't know that I'm ever going to be like a real diehard fan of this band, but I really do enjoy everything that they do. I just don't know that I like anything they've done more than Art of War. And then going back, I haven't listened to this album in a long time, and going back and listening to it again, man, I kind of forgot just how good every song on this album is. This is a really good song. And then wrapped around the Sun Tzu's Art of War with the narration and everything, and then having each song be about a different battle or a different war. It's such a history lesson. Like, I mean, only I think Iron Maiden I could think of as a band that you could listen to an album and just be like learn
something. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And what's interesting though is, like I mentioned that the lineup split a little bit earlier. I'll just kind of lay out the band just so we have it, quote unquote, on record. Joachim Broden's been there from the beginning. He's on lead vocals. He's got a voice that you can't mistake. It's one of a kind in many ways. Par Sundram on bass, also with Joachim from the beginning. Daniel Mulbach on drums. He left after Carolus Rex. Rickard Sundin also left after Carolus Rex, easy for me to say, and Oscar Mantelius also left at the same time. So you had a big, you had that undersection with the bass staying the same, you have the vocals staying the same, but then the entire band would otherwise be different after this. But it's a very interesting to me, and I'll kind of explain why a little bit later, but I'll just say this for now. If you listen to the songwriting on this album, the guitars are kind of the weak point of the entire album. I don't think there's any standout solos or riffs that just blow you away on the entire album. To me, it is the vocals and the keyboards, which are like driving this entire ship the entire time, but somehow there's a beauty in that, and it actually works very, very well. It's very unique for a power metal band, where I say the guitars are like second, if not tertiary, in terms of the order of importance.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on all those members that you mentioned that left. I mean, they all joined up to start the band Civil War, which still exists, and Mulbach, Mir, and Toby England, who would join Sabaton, I believe, after Art of War and then leave the band. They're all still current members, and Rickard Sundin and Oscar Montelius were also in Civil War. They're not anymore. It's interesting to kind of hear how they kind of went their own way, and I think that they kind of made their own unique sound, that it didn't sound like a Sabaton clone. so to speak. What I'm sorry. So what were you saying after you mentioned the band members?
Just that, like, there was something
Oh, with the
different.
guitars.
Yeah, that it was like not. It was not the primary instrument. It wasn't even a secondary instrument. It's kind of like they're just there, and they're used almost to accompany the other musicians and elements of their sound. And it's a very, very simple sound. It's not like the most complex stuff in the world, but somehow with the vocal lines and the keyboards, it just works really, really well. But I'll get into a little more detail as we get into it. The entire album is narrated by someone, and you told me about this earlier in the week because I had no idea. You want to talk about the narrator from Canada?
Yeah, I was listening to it and I'm like, the narrator is got to be Canadian. Like the accent just sounded Canadian to me, and I was like, why is there a Canadian narrator on a Swedish metal band's album? So I did a little digging, and I come to find out that the the narrations are actually pulled from the audiobook version of Sun Tzu's Art of War, and the woman who narrated it is that's one of her jobs, is basically is her profession, is to narrate for books and stuff, and she just happened to be this woman from Ontario, and I was proud of myself for picking out her accent, but she wasn't actually like chosen directly by Sabaton to narrate this album, which was kind of my assumption going into it. I guess it kind of makes sense. Why hire somebody when you can just pull stuff right from an audiobook? I might, if I ever make an album, I might use the Mick Foley "Have a Nice Day" audiobook to just put like lit lines from his book, and then I had to say in German that my ear fell off, in the ropes against Vader. Right before the song starts, "Where's my ear?"
I like it. No, it's a unique approach to use obviously the book's narrator, but also to kind of inject or include bits of the book in every track on the album. Obviously, not all of these battles were ancient Chinese battles or anything like that, but it fits nicely. And apparently, every single, I guess not every single, but copies of the limited edition actually came with the book, which I found fascinating. I read this book years ago, and I did not read the edition that came with Sabaton's album, but I did read the book. It is interesting that they would include that, but I guess with publishing rights not existing when it comes to that piece, it actually makes sense that they could include it.
Yeah, it seems like what they did was that they would take an excerpt from the book and then choose a battle that fit that
Yep.
verse or whatever. And it's so cool. Like if you know the story of 40-1, about the Polish forces being outnumbered and still managing to like win the battle, the narration that goes before that song just fits so well. And so it's like they didn't just throw a bunch of quotes from the book in willy-nilly. Like they actually put some thought into where, what songs go with which passages. And I think that this is a very it's a very the word is escaping me, but I mean it's just the amount of thought that was put into this was I think really commendable.
Yeah, it was meticulously done, to say the least. Not just like let's throw a passage in there, but let's get into it. The intro is obviously straight from the book. It's the first two sentences from The Art of War, and then it goes into Ghost Division, which to this day is one of my favorite live songs ever. It comes at you so hard and so fast, and if I'm not mistaken, they've, for a while, I can't say for the last tour, but they've used this as an opening track on most of their tours, and it is perfect. It's so heavy, melodic, and fast, and those keys just hook you right away. And this is a perfect example of the little things that I think make this track, between like the backing vocals in certain sections and a kind of that crunchy guitar tone, not the riffs, but the tone. So catchy. The one knock, I guess, if I have to have one, it's a little repetitive, but it's only 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So let it be as repetitive as it wants. This song is great.
Yeah, big fan. I'm almost positive every time I've ever seen them live, and I have seen them at least 5 or 6 times, because if they weren't headlining, they were opening for Nightwish, or I even saw them play with did they open for Delane and Nightwish, or maybe
Yeah.
Delane opened and Sabaton played in between, but
Yeah.
like they're just like, yeah, I mean, I've seen them so many times in so many forms in so many places, like but I think this was always the opening track, and it's such a perfect song, like you said, to open with, because it's got so much energy. It just pulls you right into the show. It gets, if you're into moshing, it's the perfect song to get your mosh on right from the get go. And that, I love that keyboard solo towards the end of the song. It's one of the things I think drew me to the band, was that kind. Me, I love keyboards, and I thought that that really was a nice touch, just a really great song. And I was going into this, I was like thinking that this was going to be my song of the week, but it actually changed. And I'll when we get to that song, I'll mention what it changed to. But this is still one of my favorite songs on the album, and one of my favorite Sabaton songs, overall.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I love most about the album in general is the pacing. I think is great. You go into Art of War, the title track is the next track, and it slows down a bit. And I think it kind of takes you on this like journey, almost like a roller coaster, where this one slows down, and you need it after that like sonic assault that is Ghost Division. This one is a lot slower, almost plotting in its approach. But what a powerful story, and it makes you just want to like get out there and go to war with these guys. And what I love is how the chorus actually mimics the keyboard intro, which is awesome. Though, again, if I have to knock it, I don't think the instrumental section on this or most of the album is great. But I think to myself, imagine listening to this song without keyboards. I don't think it would be very good. I think the keyboards, again, are going to make this song and much of the album. Otherwise, it's very kind of blah. But this is a great song, and it's actually one of my favorites on the album.
Yeah, same here. It's got kind of like a marching kind of tempo to it,
Mhm.
which makes sense. It's a song about a battle. It's I like that they're showing, like, in the first two songs, like, where we can kick your ass quickly or we can kick your ass at a medium pace. This is another really good song, and it shows. And you're right, like, without the keys, like, the keys really kind of are the bones of the song. So, like, without them, you have no bones. I mean, what are you going to do with no bones? You're just going to be a pile of blob on the floor. Yeah, I mean, I know I say it all the time. Like, I hate when bands pipe in their anything, really, backing vocals, keyboards. Like, to me, and I know I've talked to Steve Williams from Power Quest, who feels very strongly about this, that the live experience should be legitimate, and like everything you hear should be actually played. I agree with that, and Sabaton, I think, with all the histrionics, make it where you don't really care as much, because it's such a visually appealing thing, and the sound is just so overwhelming that, like, I don't think you care as much. But yeah, like, it would be kind of nice if they had a live keyboard player when they go back and play older songs like this, because I'm sure they still play this song, and it's probably all piped in.
Exactly. You mentioned it earlier, 40-1. There's not a time I think of anything else but Pat going nuts during this song. It was, it was so impressive that I've always kind of thought the song was faster than it is. So when I went back and played it, it's not like, it's fast, but it's not like Dragon Force fast. Although, like, you'd think it was based on the live show and Pat literally losing his mind. The verses are okay, but the bridge that leads into the chorus is the hook here, and it's really, really epic sounding. Always remember a fallen soldier. That's about all I can say about this. That, and I guess, what are the odds that they play this song when we see them in October?
20-1.
What are your thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think that like this was a song where I think I played it so many times I kind of got sick of it for a while, and now I'm kind of loving it again. It's so magnetic, like it just grabs you, and like the the lyrical content of what this story about the Polish soldiers in the Battle of Wisna, where um, it was 42,000 German soldiers versus 720 Polish soldiers, and the whole idea of how like they managed to like win this battle, the fact that they wrote a friggin' song about it, and then what would end up happening is that the band was asked to perform the song on Polish Independence Day in Gdansk. Am I pronouncing that right? I'm going to need Nops to jump in on that one. But I thought that is really cool. And then I come to find out that the MMA fighter Damian Grabowski comes out to his matches to this song. I mean, talk about a song that'll get you amped up to punch somebody in the face. Like, I mean, what a great choice. This is just such a great song, and it was my introduction to this band, my introduction to this album, and it's like an iconic song to me. So, and again, I just picture just Pat losing his mind.
Well said. It goes into Unbreakable, which again is like another bit of a slower song. What are your thoughts on that track?
So I had mentioned to you before we started recording that there was a song on this album that I forgot, like just did not remember. It was this song. Like it felt like I was listening to it for the first time. So like I listened to it a whole bunch of times. It was the only song on the album that like I just didn't recognize, and it's again it's kind of like art. It has that same kind of pacing as Art of War. I feel like where it's kind of a march. It's a good song. It's based on another one of the chapters of the book. It's probably my least favorite song on the album, but it's still a pretty good song, which I think speaks to the strength of the album overall. But I think it's kind of like a well placed in that you kind of need a little bit of a rest after 40-1, especially if you're Pat. You're probably sweating bullets right now.
This song grew on me quite a bit throughout the week. It's the longest song on the album. It's almost 6 minutes. But if you notice, the first half is a little bit slower and kind of mundane, but the second half really picks up nicely. And to me, the last like 2 or 3 minutes kind of kick ass, although the beginning loses me a bit. But it's that dichotomy, which I guess shows the improvement in songwriting, because you didn't get songs like this on Primo Vittoria or the first 3 albums really. So I didn't love it when I first heard it, but it grew on me this week. I kind of forgot about it, but there's one that we'll get to a little bit later, which I completely forgot about. I will say that I like the Seventh Wonder version better. I like Unbreakable by Seventh Wonder a little bit more, but that's just because I think I lean Prague.
Yeah. Well, did they play at that Prague Power that year as well, or was that the year after?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember. That's a great question.
I have to look into that, but there's you mentioned earlier that there's not the guitar work is not really that prominent on the album. I feel like towards the end of the song there's some guitar work here that you don't really get throughout the most of the rest of the album. As far as like solo guitar, obviously there's plenty of rhythm guitar throughout, but I mean I mean for a song that I completely forgot about, I ended up enjoying it.
We go into the nature of warfare, which is again kind of like, I don't know, spoken word over like spooky keyboard sounds. There's really not much going on here, but it kind of reminds me of like being in a haunted mansion or something like that. The next real track is Cliffs of Gallipoli, and I cannot listen to this song without thinking Gutter Ballet by Sabotage.
Oh my God.
Every single time I listen to this song, I feel like I'm listening to Gutter Ballet. So plagiarism aside, it's a very good song.
I remember seeing somewhere on like a message board or something, there was somebody who was not a fan of Royal Hunt, and they said something like they would call them like, go play your your gutter ballet ripoff somewhere else or something.
Oh, you said Royal Hunt. I know you meant Sabaton, but
That's
it
what I meant.
is.
Yeah,
It's fun. It's funny. Although the one thing about this song though is it's not just a Sabotage clone. There's like Queen spots. I hear a lot of Queen in there towards the end, and I think it's one of the better vocal performances on the album. Um, a perfect reminder that you can't play this song live without keyboards. I'm sorry, it just there's too much of it to kind of rip off the fans like that. Could have been my song of the week. I think it's really well constructed, but it's not.
Yeah, there was a time where this was my favorite song on the album. It's still one of my favorites. I It's one of those songs I look forward to hearing live. I think it comes across really well. But yeah, like it's so hard to listen to it and not think of Sabotage. Even like the piano sounds like a John Oliva piano.
Right.
But not so much the actual like vocal lines. It's just that guitar intro is almost like note for note gutter ballet. It's just it's impossible not to hear. That said, though, really fantastic song. Yeah, just good stuff. I remember when they played it when they came back to Prague Power to headline, and just being excited to hear it, just because it's such just an epic and powerful song. So.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Next track, Talvasada. This to me is very, very reminiscent of Stradivarius. It's that straight up power metal tune that kind of you tap your toe to. No real gimmicks, no real fluff, just a solid track. Not my favorite, but a solid track. And another one that I would love to hear live. I don't think they've played this. I could be wrong. But the guitar, the only complaint I have here is that the guitar solo is kind of weak. I would love to hear Tommy Johansson play this. I feel like he would do it a little bit better justice. But overall, just a straight up, like modern style Stradivarius song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have played it live. I remember seeing it on a set list. I think it was one of those songs where they would do a thing where like they would have the fans vote, like at the show, like, do you want to hear Talvasada, do you want to hear Cliffs of Gallipoli? And like whichever song got the most cheers, they would just play, which I thought was kind of neat. Like a lot of bands don't necessarily do that, and especially metal bands that oftentimes play the same set show to show. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it's just a really straightforward, just energetic power metal song. I don't think it's as memorable as some of the big hits on this album, but just a solid tune.
What about Panzerkampf, which the Battle of Kursk from the Soviet perspective? This one's a really dark one, and I guess I kind of understand why, given the nature of the track. Slower, anthemic, but I got to be honest with you, not one of my favorite tracks. A good history lesson, I think, for sure, but the verses are just so bland, in my opinion, that this one loses me. I think it's one of the worst tracks on the album.
Yeah, I think I probably like it a little bit more than you do. I feel like they kind of made a very similar song in Carolus Rex when that song would come out. It's kind of in that same vein. I really enjoy the vocals on this song. Like he really kind of, I think, really brings that energy, and he's such a unique vocalist. I think that was another thing too, is that seeing them live and just first of all, he looks unique. He's got a wild haircut, mirrored shades, the facial hair, the fatigues. I mean, the guy is just like a character, and then just that voice comes out, and it's just he's such a charismatic frontman, but also just a really great singer as far as like that kind of raspy kind of thing. And I think that this is actually one of the better vocal performances on the album, even if the song itself is not as memorable as some of the other ones.
I'll accept that. I think you're right about that. I remember when he split his pants. I think it was in Rochester, if I'm not mistaken. Literally,
Prague Power.
Was it a Prague Power? He literally split his pants open. You can't make it up, but I guess he got new fatigues after that, because you can't go to war with torn fatigues, obviously. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
Especially not in that spot.
No, no, I agree. Next track, Union, The Slopes of Saint Benedict. This was the track that I completely forgot. Do you have any strong thoughts on this one? Because I hear something here, and I'm wondering if you caught the same thing I did.
I got some strong thoughts. It's my song of the week.
Really?
I whereas like with Unbreakable, I legitimately just forgot it existed. This was a song that I remembered when I heard it, but it had been so long since I heard it, and I was just like, damn, this song is awesome. Like how did I forget about this? This is just that whole, the way that it starts out, just, oh my God, just like pulls you right in. Then I come to find out it's about an Italian battle. So, I mean, near and dear to my heart. I just think this might be the most underrated song on the album and one of the most underrated Sabaton songs. Maybe because, like, you know, Price of a Mile is the next track, and that's like one of the most memorable Sabaton songs and a live staple. But this song is phenomenal. I'm curious what made you think of.
Well, let's give it a listen, and then I'll come back after we give it a shot.
All right, let's check it out.
It is our turn to rise, the force of a union at war. March over mountains on our way to the north, on the road that will lead us to Rome. Our way will not be easy, it will take us through hardship and pain. Hill after hill, breaking the lines of defense.
There you have it. It is a very good song. I think what I hear, and maybe it's just me, there are like folky elements to this song which you don't get on the rest of the album. So I almost feel like it's a touch of an elevaty sound, not overwhelming, not hurdy-gurdy elevaty sound, but just a touch of elevaty power metal in there.
I think it's because it kind of has like a violin kind of vibe. And I think that kind of is what sucks me in. And I love when something is different from the rest, and like you don't really get any of that on this album. And I love folk elements. I love when folk elements are brought in, and I just think the way that this song starts, it's just kind of like I just love it. I this was like a legit like positive surprise going back and listening to this album again, because this one like just kind of passed me by after all these years. And it was just like the first time I listened to it again I think it was on Sunday. I was just like, oh my God, where did this come from? Just a real lovely surprise. I'm thrilled to have rediscovered it.
Nice. And I look forward to posting it this week so that I get to listen to it again. But without further ado, let's get to my track of the week, which you mentioned briefly before, The Price of a Mile. This song is maybe the most well-constructed song on the entire album, but I'm going to tell you why. It is so simple and so basic and like almost like there's nothing to it. It's just the guitar riff is like so boring in a sense, but there was something so brilliant in the simplicity of this song that it's somehow so catchy and so kind of just sucks you in, even though there's really not that much going on. I thought it was like really interesting how they're able to do that. And if it wasn't for the keys and that like bombastic vocals during the choruses, I think the song would actually be awful, but I love it just because of just like the whole mix of elements that's going on here. Curious to hear your thoughts, but let's give it a listen.
Roads and houses, all is gone. There's no glory to be won. Know that many men will suffer. Know that many men will die. Half a million lives at stake as past the fields of Passchendaele. And as the night falls, the general calls, and the battle carries on and on. What is the purpose of it all? What's the price of a mile? Thousands of feet march to the beat. It's an army on the march. Long way from home, paying the price in young men's lives. Thousands of feet march to the beat. It's an army in despair. Knee deep in mud, stuck in a trench with no way out.
Well, there you have it. My song of the week. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those like marching tempo songs, and it's probably my favorite one on the album that's in that kind of style. Another one where I think they take it to a whole nother level live. It's just such a great live song, and yeah, it's kind of interesting because like this is a band that takes like this. A tempo like this, like a march tempo, can easily be so boring, and they make it so interesting, and then they kind of like frost the cake, if you will, with these like really fast and powerful power metal songs. It's just such a wonderful combination, the way they kind of weave in and out of like your Ghost Divisions and your 40 to 1s, and then you have your Art of Wars and your Price of a Miles. And we talk a lot about like order, like the right kind of order on an album, and I'm not sure anything on this album should be changed at all. I
would argue, see, it's fun. I'm glad you mentioned that. My one complaint is that it's not the final track. I would have replaced Price of a Mile and Firestorm, which is the last full track on the album, because I think Firestorm falls flat for me, and it has like that galloping beat, but there's not really that much else going on, and I feel like they should have ended it with the anthemic march that is Price of a Mile. I would have actually everything else is perfect. I would just flip the last two tracks.
Yeah, it sounds like they wanted to end it with something more upbeat, because this is another one of the faster songs. And I don't know, I was disappointed that they didn't say anything about a level 4 core meltdown of the occipital lobe. I think that's a different Firestorm and a very, very deep cut.
Shout out to Eternity X.
Yeah, I'm fine with this being the last track, honestly. As much as Price of a Mile, I think is way more epic and memorable. I kind of like that they went with something a little bit more upbeat and less depressing, I guess. I find carpet bombing campaigns to be a little bit less depressing than Senseless Slaughter.
Well, so. There you go. I mean, technically the album ends with a song called The Secret, which is really just like an outro track. But I appreciate the point. You got to send them home happy. Hogan must pose, right? So like this is what they did.
Yeah, I mean the A Secret is not even a song. I think it's just it's like a computerized voice, maybe trying to like scare somebody who maybe stole the album, like as if their computer would know that they didn't pay for it. I thought it's fun.
Well done.
I also want to just throw a shout out to a track that ended up becoming like a live staple. Swedish Pagans.
It's a great song.
Yeah, I think it was added. They made these rearmed versions of their older albums in 2010. And they added a bunch of bonus tracks, and one of them was the song "Swedish Pagans," and it's like one of their like live staples now, because I think it's just such a fun song to be like present for. And I'm just spitballing here, but it sounds like it might have been recorded maybe on like when they were recording a previous album, because I don't feel like it sounds as polished as the rest of Art of War, but It's a fun song. It's a really like kind of like one of those like swing your mug around and like at the pub with your pint of ale. I just
sounds like Friday night.
Yeah, just another Friday at the old Swedish saloon. Just a really fun tune. I just didn't want to finish without mentioning that. song.
No, well said. Very, very good album. Definitely my favorite. I don't think that that's an overstatement by any means. Nothing that they would release after this would come close, in my opinion. And quite frankly, it's just a more polished version of what they had been doing with an upgrade in the songwriting. Scale of 1 to 10, what are you giving this?
I'm gonna go with a 8.75. I just think it's a really fantastic album. It's my favorite Sabaton album. It doesn't quite reach that kind of like 9 area for me, and it's not really for any reason that like any of the songs aren't good or anything like that. I just think that it's I just feel like you can't just give everything a 9 all the time, and I'm pretty liberal with my rankings, but I feel like this just, at least for me, just falls a little bit underneath that, but it's still very good, and it's really, it was a pleasure to kind of go back and listen to this, because it brings back a lot of memories for me personally of getting back into metal again. And this was one of the bands that really did it for me, along with Delane and Seventh Wonder, who we mentioned before, and just some of those bands that were playing those prog powers in 2009, 2010, 2011 that really just brought me back and really just reinvigorated my love of music, which we'll talk about the some of the beginnings of that next week. But yeah, a lot of good memories from this, and a lot of great memories from seeing this band live as well.
Yeah, no question about it. It's a 7.5 for me. It's a very good album. It's my favorite by them. I just think that there's other stuff that I gravitate to a little bit more. So I kind of, I don't know. I guess live show wise, those early live shows were top notch. I look forward to seeing them again, and I hope that they play a lot of material from this album, but I don't know that I can put it in that rarefied air of an 8.5 or a 9 or anything like that. It's a 7.5 for me, possibly an 8 if I'm in the right mood, but that's, I think, where I have this one. Before we get to next week, and to be fair, to let the cat out of the bag, we are recording these a little bit out of order because I'll be away for a bit, so we did record next week's show before we did this one, so that's why you know what it is, because normally it is a surprise, but I'll mention what we're doing at the end. Couple of news items. First, a little bit of sad news. Steve Grimmett from Grim Reaper has passed away. I cannot begin to say I was a fan of this band because I don't know anything by them, but I have heard certain isolated tracks that Steve Grimmett sang on, and the guy had one hell of a voice. It's really sad to hear that he was basically suffering for the last 5 years after having his right leg partially amputated, and he passed away at 62 years old. Really, really sad news. I would encourage you to go back, and I'll try to post a track or two this week, just because you got to hear this guy sing if you've never heard him, heard him do his thing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I just saw a lot of people make posts about it, and it's always a bummer when my friends are sad to see somebody pass away. But curiosity definitely dictates that I would like to hear what this guy sounded like.
No question about it. And obviously, coming off the heels of a Megadeth episode, what better than some Megadeth news? Apparently, Megadeth was contacted by Amazon to do a Judas Priest cover for some sort of an upcoming project that they're doing.
It sounds like you're just putting words randomly jumbling together and like what?
entirely possible. But at some point, Megadeth is coming out with this project on Amazon and doing a Judas Priest cover. So we look forward to that. That'll be interesting.
And then, by the way,
yeah.
I want to tell you, I had talk about the weird shit that goes through my head. I had a dream last night that Milton announced that Judas Priest was going to be in the 3 slot at day 2 of Prog Power. So how about that? Milton, make it happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you dream it, maybe you can will it to happen. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I will tell you, I think Sabaton once did a tour with Judas Priest, so I think everything's coming full circle this week. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure. And some other news, a favorite of the show, Jeff Scott Soto, announced a new album with former Megadeth bassist David Ellefson. It's called Vacation in the Underworld, and it comes out on October the 7th. I know nothing about this other than Jeff Scott Soto singing, so I'll probably check it out. I think it'll be an interesting collaboration, to say the least.
Is Ellison the one that got himself into some hot water not that long ago?
Yes.
All right. We don't have to go into that, but man, Soto, dude keeps himself busy. I mean, it's unbelievable. This guy's got an album coming out every 6 months, it feels like.
Feels like it's every 6 weeks, but more power to him. We'll check that out. And lastly, some new music from Candlemass. They announced their new album, Sweet Evil Son. It's due out November 18th on Napalm Records. I believe
not Sweeticus, Evilicus, Sonicus, because that's what
that
should have been.
Would be very apt, obviously. I look forward to hearing it. Like I said, I mentioned it when we did the Candlemass episode. They were great on 70,000 Tons. I would love to see them again at some point, and I have no doubt that they will tour for the new album, which, like I said, comes out November 18th, so definitely worth checking that out as well.
Yeah, I remember mentioning when we did our Candlemass episode that they would be a band that I would be very interested in seeing live. So yeah, I imagine a tour will be forthcoming.
No question about it. But that gets us to next week. And like I said, this is already in the bag, so there's no turning back now. But we're going to do something very, very different. Back when Pearl Jam's 10 celebrated its 30th anniversary, I selected that album. And I know that you're a huge Pearl Jam fan. And, sometimes we like to go a little off the beaten path, right? We've done the Monkees, we've done Pearl Jam. We're going back to that mid-'90s period, but we're doing a band that we both love and I don't apologize for at all. We're going to do some Green Day next week, and we're going to do their 1994 classic, Dookie. Not their best album, but certainly a lot to talk about with that one. So I think if you're not a fan of alternative or punk pop, may not be your week to listen, but I would encourage you to give it a shot because it's going to be very, very different, and I think you'll be intrigued to hear what we have to say.
I was going through the archives, just kind of putting together a spreadsheet of info and just for our own, we're on to 110 or so episodes, and it's getting to a point where we need to start writing things down lest we forget them and don't want to have to go figure it all out when there's 500 episodes. But I was going through it. It turns out it was almost a year ago to the day that we did that Pearl Jam episode. So maybe it's just the time of the year where we have to go and re-find our early 90s alt roots. But I'm looking forward to talking about this album
a couple days ago. But that's neither here nor there.
I imagine that I probably have a lot to say about it, and I'm excited. I'm actually really excited for everyone to hear it because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's. I feel like thanks to our discussions about the 1997 mixtape from Ralph, and then the Monkees and Pearl Jam, and now Green Day. It's kind of telling the story of my love of all music from the youngest age till now. And so it's kind of like watching it like we're watching Lost, where the entire thing is completely out of order chronologically, but eventually you'll get the full story. So
there you have it.
I'm excited for people to hear this, and I'm hoping that maybe we could try to get some of our friends that are not metal people to maybe give it a listen and just see what it is we do as far as this podcast goes. I'm sure you have a ton of friends that couldn't give a shit about Sabaton, but might want to listen to you talk about Green Day.
100%. I like it. So that's that, and we got some other fun stuff in store in September and October, so we'll get to that when the time is right. But for now, enjoy the little reprieve, and we'll come back next week, and then we'll come back with the request that you kind of alluded to earlier in 2 weeks. So enjoy, bud.
Sorry, I didn't mean to drop that one a little bit early, but
that's all right. Whatever. It's to see if anyone was paying attention. It was buried in there somewhere. So enjoy the week, bud, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, take care, pal.
Under